Social Spectrum podcast, where we navigate neurodiversity together. So, in today's episode, we're joined by someone truly inspiring, Sharon Murphy, the heart and soul behind Keeley's cause. So, as a CEO, welfare counselor, and advocate, Sharon has spent over 2 decades creating meaningful change for neurodivergent individuals and their families. Her compassion, lived experience as a mother of 3, and her tireless work through Keeley's cause have touched countless lives. Join us as we explore her journey, her mission, and her insights into creating a more inclusive world for every child. So, hi, Sharon, and I welcome you to the Social Spectrum podcast. And it's lovely having you here.
Thanks, Sakana.
So you've been such a passionate voice for inclusion and understanding in the autism community. So I'd love to start by hearing what first inspired your advocacy journey.
Obviously, the lack of resources and support for families. So prior to Keeley, I do have other children. So my son Lee, he's now 33. When he was diagnosed with autism at 10, because there was nobody diagnosing it back then, there were no support services that there are today. So there was none of what's available. You virtually had to just wing it as a parent. Do your best with what you had. And I guess that made me more resilient in seeing what was needed. So when there was support available, you kind of jump on it to be able to support families as much as you can and advocate, because it's a very tough gig being a parent. There's many highs and lows, but if we can equip as many parents as we can with, good information and resources to guide them through, I think that's half the battle of, being alone and having to navigate that world by yourself. I think it's important that people have support and, have people to turn to, because it's not always an easy road.
Yeah, it hasn't been like it always comes from personal experience. Like even in my case, it's from a personal experience, and that's where you feel you become passionate to advocate.
Yeah. That's right. But a lot of people that, are in these families don't have the strength or willpower to be advocates. So if we can be their voices and guide that light, then all the more. I mean, the more people that are sharing great information, it's not an exact, because every child is different, but it's a guide to letting you know where to first start. So
yeah. So it's like, I mean, going back, even I remember my journey, like when I received my son's diagnosis, it really just kind of shook our world and changed our perspective. I mean, we weren't ready for that diagnosis at that moment.
Yeah.
Because there's something that you perceive differently, and when it actually happens to you, it's very different. So
as you talk about that, I think the biggest thing that we struggle with, if we look back, is that parents don't have the discussion of, what if we get a child with a disability?
Yeah.
So you go on, you meet your partner, you want to get married, it's all lovey-dovey, you want to have children, and and I'm going to have a boy, and he's going to be a doctor, and I'm going to have a daughter, and she's going to be a ballerina, and and you set that vision for your life, and a lot of comes from the fairy tales we read too, because this is going to be absolutely amazing, we're going to live this world. But nobody talks about, what if we have a child with a disability? And you may not, but I think you need to be open to the discussion, because a lot of people with children with disabilities, their marriages break down because the father doesn't understand, or the mother can't cope, or whatever, and then they lose that support system. So I think it's a very important conversation to have with the person that you're ultimately wanting to spend your life with, to know, are you going to be supported if you do have a child with a disability, or are they going to have that stigma around them of, oh my God, I can't have a child with a disability? Because if that's what's going to happen, which is what happened between me and my first husband, he couldn't handle anything less perfect than him. So he bailed. So I was left with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. I mean, it ended up being a lot better for me. But
Yeah.
in that moment, I didn't have that support because he didn't want to know about his child. And
Yeah.
that's a shame because it's not the kid's fault. So I think having that conversation lines you up ready
Yeah.
for if you do. And if you don't, all and well, but there's also that when you see that your child might have a disability, you kind of want that diagnosis because you know it's going to, give you the support service. But at the same time, when you get that diagnosis, as much as you knew that your child might have been, there's still that shock factor as well
Yeah.
and that grieving process. And it's okay to have that shock process because it becomes reality. Like you're like, oh yeah, I think they are. But when the doctor says no, they are, it's
Yeah.
like, well, what does this mean now? What does this mean for my child? What does it mean for my family? And then there's all that panic and anxiety around it. You
Yeah.
just have to go with the flow and allow yourself to
Yeah.
grieve. If you're upset, it's not because it's a bad thing. It's the motion of what you're supposed to
Yeah.
do.
It's because you're not prepared for that. And
Absolutely.
when you see, like when I could see some kind of symptoms, I'm still in denial that no, it can't be, it won't be. And then
Yeah.
when the doctor finally says it to you, then it's like you just have to accept it. And like it is what it is. And then
That's right. You
like,
can't change it. It is what it
yeah,
is. Like people say to me, where does your strength come from? Well, I can't cry in the corner because it's not going to fix it.
right.
So I just have to deal with it and move on with it and adapt the best way that I can moving forward to best support my child. How
Yeah.
am I going to do that? I'm going to try and get as much information as I can
Yeah.
um, to understand it more. The first point is the parent needs to understand it themselves what autism is
Yeah.
before they go on the journey of trying to find what they're going to do for the child. Because sometimes some of the resources or the um, therapies and stuff that are out there aren't for every child and they may not be for yours. So the more important thing after the diagnosis is, you know, get your knowledge about what it is, what autism is, what it means, the whole kit caboodle. And I think knowledge is power. So the more that you have, the better understanding of it you have.
And like, what were the early days like for you when you realized that Keely's needs were different?
Um, yeah, well, I kind of knew both Lee and Keeley. More so, Lee than Keeley.
Okay.
But then I started to notice things when she wasn't walking at two. Um, I noticed that when people came in the room, certain people she would attach to and others she wouldn't.
Yeah.
She wasn't verbal until she was nearly 3.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, there were little signs, but not as prominent as they were in my son. So I knew from 2 that Lee had autism, but like I said, the services weren't around. But when he did get his diagnosis, he was diagnosed with autism and ADHD. Keely was diagnosed with autism at 5, and then later diagnosed at 13 with a mild intellectual disability because I started to notice that she wasn't learning. Like they diagnosed her back then with Asperger's, like her brother. And at that stage, that was when it was a high functioning autism. They were, you know,
Yeah.
stronger in learning with maths and English and stuff like that, which my son was. But Keely seemed to really struggle with learning.
Yeah.
And that's when I approached the school and said, I think there's more going on here. But they told me that she wouldn't meet the criteria for funding, so just tap into the aid. But once we left primary school, there was still a lot there because we kept her down in grade 4 because she didn't know any of the times tables. So when we got her assessed at 13, that's when it came in that she had a mild intellectual disability. And that just became a relief for us because that then helped us to explain why she wasn't learning because I couldn't work out,
Yeah.
if she's been diagnosed similar to her brother with similar traits,
Yeah.
then how come he's flowing and she's struggling?
Yeah.
And then it made sense. It made sense to what was going on. So she learns differently. She still has a couple of issues with some speech things and stuff like that. But she's come a long way to what she was when she very first started Keeley's cause to who she is today. Yeah, she's gone in leaps and bounds.
So how, like, have you seen any changes, like, on the school support, like how the school supported with your son? I know you said that at that time there wasn't a lot of awareness and support, but how did the schools or communities like change their understanding of autism or neurodiversity
Well,
from?
Lee attended Karanjang Secondary College, and when we first started there, they had been in touch with autism providers, so they knew a lot about autism, Asperger's, and stuff like that. So Lee was very supported there. He was lucky that the friends that he had gone to teachers and said, Lee's a bit different and we don't know why. Um, and he has autism and we don't know what that is. So the teachers explained to them what that was and they went, oh, okay. And then from then they never questioned it. And some of them he still remains friends with today. So it's a matter of communicating and um sharing your experience, I suppose,
Yeah,
and getting, like for kids in schools, asking the questions, why is he different, or,
yeah,
what is autism? And I think the more that the questions are answered, the less stigma and bullying and all that sort of stuff. Um, yeah, I still believe that inclusion and everything should be taught in
yeah,
classrooms once a week.
yep. I think
Um,
that's where the
I
word
think it's important.
inclusion comes into picture. I mean, like I think we've talked about this earlier as well, that we spend so much of time and hours for our children going through therapy, but how
Yeah.
about even training the neurotypical children of how to include the other children as well?
Well, that's right, because schools think that inclusion is we've let the child in the class, so now he's included. But
Yeah,
it's so much more than that. Inclusion isn't just being in the room.
right.
Inclusion is being, um, put into everything that's in that process. Like the same as, you might go on an excursion, but your child might have a disability and they'll say he can't come because he can't get on the bus. Well,
Yeah,
that's not inclusion. Get a teacher or someone to drive him there. Why
yeah,
does he have to miss out? If you're an inclusive school, then you're included in everything in the curriculum. It's not like we were told we have 27 children that learn normally and two children that don't. Well, that's not inclusion,
mhm,
because why is my child sitting at the back of the room?
yeah,
Because you've put her in the too hard basket, but you're taking my money to give her an education and she's not getting one. So I think they really need to have a look at what their inclusion policies are. And it's not just we've invited them into the school or they're in the classroom now, so they're being included, because it's not. It's about teaching the children that are in the classroom to be inclusive. Because sometimes I've noticed that when the teacher gets upset with a child that's playing up, she'll bring to the attention to the whole grade that the child's naughty. But for a child with a disability, that then goes out into the playground, because then it's, oh, well, I don't want to play with you because the teacher said you're naughty. So you've got to change the way that you approach things in the classroom as well as a teacher, because you've got children listening to you
yeah,
and they're mirroring your behavior. It's that same old thing, monkey see, monkey do. So if you're putting out there that this child's naughty and these kids are being told, oh, well, don't play with naughty children, well, they're not going to play with them.
yeah,
So, but my theme is if you see a child alone, whether it's a child with a disability or a child that doesn't, don't leave that child sitting there by themselves. That's a lonely world. Nobody should have to be in that position, disability or no disability.
yeah, correct. I mean, you just like I was going to talk about what do you think families and educators often get wrong about inclusion, which you just answered. Because in school, their idea of inclusion would be just putting the child along with the other children,
Yes,
but not actually focusing on what that child actually needs at that moment. Like
that's
even
right.
for a playtime, it's like actually including the other children. Yeah, the same thing with a disability or without a disability, just making that child feel more included in that. The
Yeah, and that's right. And if the child, you get children that will banter each other if they're sitting together and yeah, yeah, yeah. And, they might say to a child with autism, I want you to sit in that chair. And the child might go, well, I don't want to sit there. It's not because they don't want to sit with the child. It might just be because they want to just be on their own. They
Yeah.
don't want to have the distraction. Because when there's distraction, the child with a disability will react. And then it's the child with the disability that's getting told off for acting out or whatever, but they're not seeing the process. And this is what I spoke about when I spoke at the National Education Summit.
Mhm.
Sometimes when the child's playing up, it's not because they're doing anything wrong, it's because they can't manage what's happening at the table or to them.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of kids don't want to sit with someone, especially those learners that are very self-learning. They don't want the distraction. So it's just a matter of learning, what those child's needs are and having a conversation with that child. If he's having a meltdown, why is he having a meltdown? If he's acting out, why? What's happened? Ask the questions. Just don't just ask the kid that's got the output that's saying, oh, well, he's annoying me. Well, it takes two, not just one. So you've got to get down to the nitty gritty of it, and you've got to get down to their level so they don't feel intimidated by you standing over the top of them. So there's still a lot of changes that need to be made.
Yeah. And like we're talking about schools, but how do you see it in communities, like in like outside in the society, in malls and movie theaters, or even with your family
Well, I
friends?
think it's the same thing. I think it's lack of understanding and information, because our disability families experience loneliness because they have a child with a disability, right?
Yeah.
And I've heard mothers say, oh, we're not inviting her over for coffee because she's got that child with a disability. Well, that's all and great, but sometimes you need to put the shoe on the other foot, because you need to put yourself in the life of somebody with a disability, because how would that be if that was you? You know what I mean? And I always say, put the shoe on the other foot and imagine your life. If your child had a disability, what would you be doing? And you hear them say, "Oh, I would advocate for them." Well, of course you will. It's your child. So why are you begrudging her for doing that as well? Because her child has, a disability or learning difficulties or something. So the more you pick people up for them judging, the more you'll change it. But the more we allow people to make these judgments, the longer it goes on. There's still that stigma around the word disability, because as soon as you say that word dis, people go, oh, he can't do anything.
Yeah.
And we need to let you know that just because you have a disability, these kids are capable of so much more and then some. It's like when you tell someone that the child's nonverbal, they talk to the child like there's something wrong with them. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah, well, he can hear you. He just can't talk.
Or you
So
just ignore them, like diss them that, oh, because they're not talking, that means they're not understanding what's going on.
that's right. And I can tell you they know exactly what's going on. They hear everything. And like I said, when we give a child that's nonverbal access to technology, the words that they come out with and the things that they write absolutely floor you, because there is that perception around the stigma
Yeah.
that, oh, they can't talk, so they can't do anything. But they can do lots.
Yeah.
They hear every word you say. That's why you have to be careful how you treat them. They're not idiots,
Yeah.
you know?
I met someone who is nonverbal, and he actually wrote something on his iPad, a kind of essay, which I mean, I wouldn't even like I wouldn't expect that someone at his age, even neurotypical or anyone, could
Yeah.
write the thing. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
They're very, very clever.
yeah,
Very clever. And this is the whole reason of technology. And like for Keeley's school, when she was in primary, they said that they weren't going to give her an iPad to use, because what would the other parents say if she had one and they didn't? And the doctor had written that she needed technology to learn, but the school decided that they were going to overrule that because they didn't want to give her screen time. Well, there's another problem, because teachers don't have the right to overrule a doctor. A doctor's not just saying it for something to do because, oh my God, we're just going to give this kid an iPad. There's reasons behind it. And if Keely had had that support back then, plus the aid in the room, I think that she would have been more advanced going into high school than what she was when she started. Because having that full-time aid one-on-one, even in the disability schools, when she attended high school, helped her so much to be able to then, do things that she obviously wouldn't normally do because it was tailored to the way she learnt.
Mhm.
And I think if parents have students have kids that do fall in that line of specialist school, I think a specialist school is probably, from my point of view and my understanding and our dealings with it, one of the best avenues to go. Because when you go to a specialist school, they're all working together with you. Like, how do we manage a meltdown and all these other things? And they get the physios in and the OTs in, and that's all there. And that's another reason that we partnered with Understanding Zoe, because that's another thing for the teachers and everyone to be on the same platform and working together to best support the child in a meltdown and everything like that, or learning and whatever. So there's lots of things coming available now, some a little too late. But the fact that they're advancing, then, they help our next lot of kids as well. Because obviously autism is not going to go anywhere in a hurry.
Yeah.
So the more we evolve and the more support that we can get, yeah, it's more about, yeah, creating that inclusive environment. Um,
And this is like we're talking about the child, right? That
yeah,
support for the child, but then we also need to support the families, like we said in community.
absolutely, absolutely. Because they shouldn't be, it's a long road. And if they haven't got anyone to turn to, look, most families have trouble with their own family. They're shunned by their own family. They don't need to be shunned by friends as well. And when you're walking out into a community that judges you, that's a horrible feeling. And knowing that your child can't play with anyone. Like, there was one year here, I think it was grade 3 or 4. Keeley wanted to have a birthday party and wanted to invite the whole grade. And I was like, oh my. So we invited the whole grade. Not one person turned up.
Yeah, I know you told me the story. It's just
Yeah,
hard.
we had a jumping castle, we had a face painter, all the food. There was a knock at the door, and it was my girlfriend from the next suburb who'd come with her little boy and little girl. And that was it. So out of 28 students, not one of them turned up. And then Keely's standing at the door. What's wrong with me, mummy? And I said to her, nothing's wrong with you, sweetheart. Absolutely nothing. And that shattered her because
Of course, it's like just it's heartbreaking, and
yeah.
I
And there
told
was
you.
no RSVPs, no, I can't make it, no, yes, I'm coming. So we didn't even know if anyone or who was coming. So
Yeah,
we just went with it. But yeah, I mean, eventually that changed. But for that first time,
yeah,
um, but that's like when Keely was in grade prep. Um, we were just having a little get together at the local McDonald's. I think there was only 4 or 5 kids. She invited a little Down syndrome boy out of her class. And the mother was in absolute tears because
mhm,
he had never been invited to anything
yeah,
either. And Keely and him remained good friends for many,
yeah,
many years while she was there. And he's 23 now. So, yeah, but
yeah. It
if you
matters
if
a
you if you
lot.
look at children with disabilities,
Yeah,
they don't judge, and they will always work their way to someone with disability to be that voice. There was a boy at Lee's school that was he had epilepsy, paraplegic. He used to get picked on, and Lee was always there for him because Lee knew what it was like to be bullied and to feel alone, and you don't want that, which is why Keely started what she was. She was being bullied by teachers and students.
yeah,
So Keely's course started not just about iPads, but so nobody had to go through what she went through so that we could create an environment where we could support everyone. So we're not just about the iPads, we do a lot of work behind the scenes with the families as well. So
yeah,
no one should have to walk alone, and whether you have a disability or not. You're not
yeah,
here to be lonely. And I think it's very sad that, you know, people do that. whether they've been brought up like that, whether it just happens, but a lot of it's fear of the unknown. And but if you speak to the parent about, what's happening with her child, what's their disability, what does that mean? I have friends that asked me the same question, and I still have those friends today. So, and they understand that, when my kids are having a meltdown, why they're having a meltdown, what causes that, and stuff like that. It's
Yeah,
just,
yeah, that's exactly why. I mean, it's the same thought process from where I came from. And like the birthday parties, which I already talked about, that even for my son, like he wasn't invited. So then we thought we should take matters into our own hands. And then I had a couple of birthday parties. There was one in June where we invited all the children who were not invited to birthday parties. And I
yeah,
also met a couple of mums, and they were so overjoyed because their son had never been invited to a birthday party before. And her
that's
son,
right. Because when you're standing there as a mother
yeah,
and, you when you were young, you were invited to parties, so you just assume that the same thing's going to happen. But when your child isn't being invited, it's not just a sense of loneliness for that child, it's also a sense of loneliness for you because,
it's
even when the mums won't invite you for a they'll invite every mother around you,
yeah,
but not you. And sometimes they do it in front of you. And
yeah.
that makes it even worse knowing that, you feel that you weren't good enough. And that has an aspect then on the parent. And it shouldn't be like that. If you're going to have the meets, then do it privately. Don't make anyone feel inadequate or, not equal to you. If you don't want them there, that's fine, but don't make it that it's so visible that that other person can feel it.
And that's why, like, we have that platform, like even Social Spectrum, bringing these families together. And first, I mean, the main focus is on inclusivity, but first, we have to build our strong community that we're there for each other. And then once we're in that place, we can like connect with other people who understand our cause as well.
Well, that's right, because once it's established and people see the benefits of it, then people flock to something. Nobody likes to be the one trying something new, especially when they're a bit anxious themselves. But when they sit and watch and they see what's going on, then they feel comfortable enough to come out of that shell and be part of it. And I think that's the important thing. It's still promoting it and guiding those families in.
Yeah,
And then they get to make their own network. Then you're going to have a village of, people that autistic families that then blend together, no judgment.
yeah,
Yes, are the kids going to have meltdowns, but there'll be an understanding. It
right.
won't be, oh my God, that child's having a meltdown. It'll be, hey, is there any way I can support you?
And it's not just meltdowns, it's like not masking who you are. You don't have to
Yeah,
mask
that's right. Being who you are, free in
or
the moment.
even
If the
stop yourself.
child wants to run around and, dance up and down and stim and whatever, then that's what he does. It's not, oh my God, have a look at that kid.
Yeah,
They're just being who they are. People tell you to be who you are,
yeah,
and then when you are, you be judged for it. So you just can't win. But like I said, I think it's more lack of information and research because disability was such a huge word that was used in the past
yeah,
that didn't have positive
yeah.
attributes to it. And that stigma around disability is still there and it needs to be removed. And
Because
that can only be gained by more knowledge, information, sharing, people taking responsibilities and not being that person that shuns someone out.
yeah,
So, if you can do something that changes one person's life by just being kind,
yeah,
then it's a free flow that flows on. But
yeah.
if you still have people that are still, unkind, then the world stays the same and it never evolves.
But like you even mentioned, things are changing, times are changing. So just to come to our last section, which is more of, about positive and hope,
Yep.
gratitude and change. So what are some moments that has reminded you that people can change and understand better? Do you have any example, like personal example?
Um, I think people can change, like I said, the more information that give you and the more guidance that you can give. Like, and one of them is that if you could do anything to change the world or the outcome, what would you do? What could you do each day that becomes a part of understanding and being inclusive?
Right.
Because sometimes we just go along in our lives and we don't look at that because we're not part of that. And I think that's another thing too. Parents that don't have children with disabilities aren't looking at a world with a disability because they're not in it.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm saying sometimes you just got to step out of that equation and not be tunnel visioned in your life, but allow it to be, full circle, that you're taking in every aspect
Right.
of what can be around you, and just always be kind, because changes can be made. Like even in employment and things like that. Like academically, most of these jobs are done academically. You've got to sit a test to be able to count money and stuff like that. But what if the boy with the disability just wants to push a trolley at
Yeah.
Bunnings?
Yeah.
Why does he need to set an academic test? So when we were looking, Keeley wanted to start work at 15, 16. So we went to our local IGA and asked if there was any availability. They said yes. We said that Keeley struggles with paperwork academically. Are there options for her to have a trial to see whether she likes it as opposed to whether she fits anything? So they said yes. And because Keeley likes to keep everything straight, she was doing the shelves, and they said that in the 4 hours she was there in her trial, she'd done more work than half of them had done their whole life in 4 years.
Yeah.
And she got the job straight away. So I think it's working around that academic side, because
Yeah.
academics good for kids that are going further, but for the kids that aren't, it's not.
Yeah.
So we need to change that there's still that hands-on. Half of these kids work best on hands-on, and even in schools, I think there should still be that technology and learning part and also the hands-on.
Yeah.
Because when they leave school, they need to be able to do things as well, not just based on what they might do at school, that they might change their jobs and minds on later. So I think, those sorts of things still need to be instilled,
That's true.
because kids with disabilities, especially autism, a lot of them are rote learners, repetitive learners. So this is why Kumon and all those sorts of things are great, because it's repetitive learning. So they learn more. Because a lot of the kids with autism today, they don't understand the curriculum like Keeley didn't. For us, it was a two-step process for maths adding. When she went to school, it became a seven-step. Like that's a lot of steps for someone who's still trying to manage themselves. So, but for Keeley, the support that she received through the specialist school,
Yeah.
she was able to graduate. Um, she went on to have a part-time job. Um, she's doing amazing. And that was all because people understood her and took the time to be able to manage her the best way she needed to be managed. And I think that's the most important thing. If you're going to put your child in a school or in a community environment, you have to make sure that that support service is the right fit,
Yeah.
because if it's not, then you may as well walk away now, because it's not going to change. They're not just going to suddenly do what you need to do. That support and their understanding has to be there from the moment that you walk in there. And if it's not, then you need to find it.
Sure. So, like, just coming to the end, like, of our conversation, what message would you like to give to parents who are just starting their journey?
Um, that it's okay to fall to pieces. It's okay to be angry, because it's not just about the diagnosis. It's like I said, it's about, what's installed for my child.
Mm.
You're not going to fall in a heap. You're not going to not be able to manage. You're going to be able to do exactly all of it. You just think that you can't because it may be added work. But these kids are here to teach us to be better versions of ourselves. And I wouldn't know half as much as I know today without having my kids with disabilities, because when they trust in you and take you into their world, it's a world that is absolutely phenomenal, and you get a better understanding of how they perceive the world. And I've been so lucky that my kids have taken me there. So then I become a greater advocate because I've had that journey through their eyes, so that I can go on and, help others from the information that they've given me on how to best manage it. So um, I think the main thing is also that when you're going to support services or community organizations and things like that, that just because someone says this is how you do it doesn't necessarily mean it does. The best thing to do is to talk to your child, find out how they want you to best support them. Because if you're best supporting them through their eyes and their needs, then you're the best parent you could ever be. Champion every ounce of ability they do, even when no one else is championing. Be their biggest cheerleader.
No, that's true. And also, I would say like reach out. Don't think of it like as a stigma or something that you have to
Yeah,
be ashamed of.
absolutely.
Reach
Reach
out for the
out.
people.
Absolutely. Like as I said, Keeley's cause, we're not just about iPads. We work with the families behind the scenes. There's also you guys now. There's a lot of services out there. You just have to find the one that best suits your family.
Yeah,
But don't don't pretend that nothing's not happening, because that's probably the worst thing that you can do. And don't not share that they do have a disability, because it's okay to share that information to get more understanding. I look at it now as if how I see it now is if I talk to people and they're not open to understanding about disability, that's okay. But I then realize that they're not my network, because I can't rely on them to help me, or I can't get the support from them. And you soon work out who's there for you and who's not. You can still keep those people, but you just don't rely on them for things that you may not be able to get. But travel the journey. As much as it has its highs and lows, it's a terrific journey. When you have got a child that is then laughing and smiling, especially after a meltdown, and you can get that light about you to make it a fun thing when that meltdown's finished, the rewards outweigh all the work that you have to do. I
that's true.
wouldn't change it for anything.
And on that note, we've come to the end of the podcast. Thank you so much, Sharon, for
Thank you for having me.
your time. Yeah, it was really wonderful. Oh, as always, speaking to you and getting
Thank
your
you.
perspective.
So, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Social Spectrum podcast, and a huge thank you to Sharon Murphy for sharing her heart, her wisdom, and her incredible story with us today. If you'd like to learn more about Keeley's cause, visit keeleyscause.org.au, and don't forget to follow Social Spectrum on your favorite platform for more stories that celebrate connection, inclusion, and understanding. So until next time, let's keep building a world where every child feels seen, supported, and valued.